Amigas, amigos, bienvenidos a un nuevo capítulo de Cómics XXI. Yo soy Marcos Ordóñez y hoy os continuaré hablando de EC Cómics, la mítica editorial de los años 50, tan exitosa y con tanta proyección que en unos pocos años se vio involucrada en todo un asunto, que defendían básicamente un oportunista, psiquiatra, Frederick Wertham, y un senador interesado en que esto saliera a la luz para controlar a las mafias de la distribución de las revistas. Bueno, pues en ese punto estábamos en el capítulo anterior, Auge y Caída de EC, y en este nos colocaremos, teniendo como base ese estupendo documental que ya mostramos la semana pasada, veremos un poco las consecuencias de lo que pasó, la creación del Comics Code, del Código de los Cómics, que los propios editores crearon para autorregularse sin la intervención del gobierno, pero que yo creo que les hubiera ido mejor que incluso los políticos, que seguramente eran más avezados que ellos, lo hubieran hecho. Porque conoceremos el Comics Code y veremos que realmente era una tragedia para cualquier ámbito en la creación. Pues prácticamente no permitía nada, excepto pues las esponjosas escenas de romances y de historias que no tuvieran ningún tipo de polémica. EC continuó teniendo una proyección grande, y en los años 70 la productora británica Amicus Productions, la gran competidora de la Hammer, a la que nunca llegó ni de lejos a su altura, pues creó, como a ellos les gustaban mucho las películas de episodios, pues creó una película de episodios llamada Tales from the Crypt, y se estrenó en los años 70. Amigas, amigos, seguiremos con EC en un tercer capítulo, con alguna entrevista con sus dibujantes, y hasta entonces, pues desearos que lo disfrutéis, y hasta la próxima. Adiós. Nueva York, 1954. La ciudad y el país asisten con gran expectación a la investigación del subcomité del Senado para la violencia juvenil, investigando a las revistas de cómics como incitadoras de ese fenómeno. Todo vino a causa del afán de protagonismo del psiquiatra Frederick Wertham con la publicación de su libro La seducción del inocente. El subtítulo del texto indicaba que se hablaría de la influencia de los comics box en la juventud de hoy. El Dr. Wertham no solo atacaba a los cómics de terror de EC, sino a diferentes géneros, entre ellos los superhéroes. Ni la pobre Wonder Woman se libraba de los furibundos ataques. De ella, el Dr. Wertham llegó a decir que cuando la mujer es protagonista de la cabecera, ni forma una familia ni se dedica a ser madre. Incluso cuando Wonder Woman adopta a una pequeña, se hallan presentes tintes lésbicos. La audiencia del Senado fue transmitida por televisión, y eso hizo que todos los periódicos reflejaran la noticia, llegando incluso a aparecer en la primera página del New York Times. 2 meses después de la audiencia, 15 editoriales de cómics ya habían cerrado.
Como a perro flaco todos son pulgas, todo el mundo se sentía legitimado para dar su opinión, y así lo hizo también una de las figuras emblemáticas de la historia de Estados Unidos en el siglo XX, ni más ni menos que el director del FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, que dijo: un cómic repleto de elementos escabrosos y macabros y que ridiculiza la decencia y la honestidad puede corromper a los niños susceptibles. Antes de que fuera el gobierno de Estados Unidos quien regulara este problema, el propio sector del cómic, sus editoriales, decidieron autorregularse ellos mismos, creando un código de censura, de autocensura, que se conoció como el Comics Code, el código de los cómics. Así rezaba el código: los crímenes nunca deberán presentarse de manera que creen simpatía hacia el criminal, promuevan la desconfianza hacia las fuerzas de la ley y la justicia o inspiren en otros el deseo de imitar a los criminales. Se prohibirán las escenas de violencia excesiva, se eliminarán las escenas de tortura brutal, uso excesivo e innecesario de armas blancas y de armas de fuego, agonía física y crímenes sangrientos y horripilantes. No se debe presentar a los criminales de manera que resulten glamurosos ni ocupen una posición que genere deseo de emulación. Los policías, jueces, funcionarios gubernamentales e instituciones respetadas nunca serán presentados de manera que generen falta de respeto a la autoridad establecida. No se permitirán escenas de horror, derramamiento excesivo de sangre, crímenes sangrientos o espantosos, depravación, lujuria, sadismo o masoquismo. Ninguna revista de cómics podrá utilizar las palabras horror o terror en su título. Se eliminarán todas las ilustraciones escabrosas, desagradables y horripilantes. La inclusión de historias que traten sobre el mal se utilizará o se publicará solo cuando la intención sea ilustrar una cuestión moral, y en ningún caso se presentará el mal de forma seductora ni de manera que hiera la sensibilidad del lector. En todos los casos, el bien triunfará sobre el mal y el criminal será castigado por sus malas acciones. Si se representa un crimen, deberá ser como una actividad sórdida y desagradable. Se prohíben las escenas que traten con o con instrumentos asociados con muertos vivientes, tortura, vampiros y vampirismo, demonios, canibalismo y hombres lobo. Se prohíben las blasfemias, obscenidades, vulgaridades o palabras o símbolos que hayan adquirido significados indeseables. Las mujeres deberán ser dibujadas de forma realista, sin exagerar ninguna cualidad física. No se aceptan ilustraciones sugerentes o lascivas ni posturas sugerentes. No se permitirá la desnudez con fines meretrices ni las posturas lascivas en la publicidad de ningún producto. Nunca se presentarán figuras vestidas de manera que resulten ofensivas o contrarias al buen gusto o a la moral. Está prohibida la desnudez en cualquier forma, así como la exposición indecente o indebida. No se deben insinuar ni retratar relaciones sexuales ilícitas. Las escenas de violación, así como las anormalidades sexuales, son inaceptables. La perversión sexual o cualquier inferencia al respecto está estrictamente prohibida. Nunca se debe mostrar ni sugerir la seducción ni la violación. Muchas editoriales no quisieron llevar el sello del Comics Code en las portadas de sus revistas, pero las empresas distribuidoras no aceptaban repartos sin el sello. Tras años de dura represión, una censura tan dura hizo que nuevas editoriales y artistas crearan en total libertad y llevando los temas a puntos aún más extremos de los que quería evitar el Comics Code. Nacería un movimiento nuevo y libre, el cómic underground. Pero sigamos todavía un poco más en 1954 para ver cómo acabó la historia de EC.
Juvenile delinquents. Well, poor guy, I have news for him. They turned me into a movie director. I didn't become a juvenile delinquent. This guy's dead wrong. Dead wrong.
Although many of the attacks were directed at other publishers, Bill Gaines asked for and was granted permission to testify before the committee.
I was the first publisher in these United States to publish horror comics. I'm responsible. I started them. Some may not like them. That's a matter of personal taste. It would be just as difficult to explain the harmless thrill of a horror story to a Dr. Wortham as it would be to explain the sublimity of love to a frigid old maid. My father was proud of the comics he published, and I'm proud of the comics I published.
Gaines defended his books on the grounds of free speech. He told the committee that he felt constrained only by the limits of good taste.
What happened was, of course, Bill was not astute enough or experienced enough to be able to parry some of the "when did you stop beating your wife" questions that came flying at him after his testimony.
One of those questions concerned a recent issue of EC's crime suspense stories.
Do you think that this cover is in bad taste? And Bill said, no, I don't think so. How would it be in bad taste? And he said, well, if you showed the gore dripping from it. And they nailed him with that.
The exchange made front-page news and turned public opinion decisively against Gaines.
Bill's mistake was, by volunteering to testify, he focused all the negativity on himself and EC Comics. So now the villain, the evil comic book publisher, now had a face and a name, and that name was William M. Gaines.
The Senate hearings quickly turned up the heat on EC. Wholesalers began refusing to handle Gaines's comics. Bundles were returned to the office, unopened. Attempting to rally the other comic book publishers, Gaines proposed an association to fight the growing witch hunt.
So he called a meeting to say, let's fight this censorship as a group. And the other publishers had a wonderful idea about how to fight the censorship. Let's get rid of the violence, let's get rid of the horror, let's wipe out all of the stuff that EC does, and then we'll all be very happy.
Gaines stormed out of the meeting, leaving the other publishers to form the Comics Magazine Association of America. The group immediately outlawed the use of the words crime, horror, terror, and weird, all of which had figured prominently in EC's biggest sellers. The publishers also established a code of ethics, which forbade all scenes of horror, excessive bloodshed, and gory or gruesome crimes. All comics which complied with the code would receive the association's seal of approval. Judge Charles Murphy, a New York City magistrate, was appointed the first code administrator, the comics czar. Ostracized by the other publishers, and with no wholesalers willing to handle his comics, Gaines was forced to surrender. On September 14, 1954, he announced that he was discontinuing his line of horror and crime comics.
I, for one, do not believe, and never have believed, that comics are a cause of juvenile delinquency. I've taken this action based on a premise which has never been proven. However, I feel that the public must be served. If this is the way the public wants it, this is the way it'll have to be as far as I'm concerned.
I was too young to pay attention to the Kefauver hearings. All I knew is that
One day, I couldn't find my EC Comics anymore. And I was left with, you know, Superman and Batman and, you know, just, you know, whatever was left. You know, they were good, but it wasn't the same.
The new Comics Code put a dozen publishers out of business overnight. Gaines, however, was not ready to throw in the towel. Instead, he and Feldstein created a new, clean line of comics, which they called, appropriately, their New Direction. Although they refused to join the association, EC's new comics stuck to the letter of the code.
Gaines tried putting out comics without the Comics Code symbol, and he didn't get onto newsstands. The books would be printed, they'd be shipped out to wholesalers. The wholesalers would just take them and ship them right back for credit, and Gaines was suddenly now unable to get his comics to the customers.
Gaines had no choice but to swallow his pride and join the association. He had a difficult time, however, winning approval for any of his stories.
Initially, when the Comics Code was started, its mission was to prove it was necessary. So they started ripping stories apart, deleting things which, in hindsight, seem ridiculous. Most censorship drives seem ridiculous in hindsight, but these seemed especially ridiculous even at the time.
I think that his mission was to put us out of business, or at least make it so impossible for us to publish that Bill would quit.
Gaines quickly became frustrated with the code's censorship. "This is what our forefathers came to America to escape," he told his distributors.
Dad was a very good Indian chief, but he wasn't a good squaw. He didn't follow really well. And to be in a position where he had to present his material and have someone else decide whether it was appropriate or not was very difficult for him.
After a year of working under the code's censors, EC finally had it out with Judge Murphy.
We had a science fiction story about mutants that he completely refused to let us run. And so I brought a replacement story.
The replacement story was called Judgment Day and had run 3 years earlier in Weird Fantasy. The story was one of Gaines and Feldstein's Preachies, an allegory about racial tolerance. In it, a space investigator visits a planet inhabited by orange and blue robots to determine if they were advanced enough to join the Galactic Empire.
You differentiate between blue robots and orange robots?
Of course. Otherwise there'd be trouble. Have to keep them in their place, you know.
After determining that prejudice existed among the robots based on the color of their armor, the investigator concluded they were not yet ready to join the Empire. Upon returning to his spaceship, the investigator removed his helmet, revealing African-American features.
Well, Judge Murphy said, no, you can't have that. I said, you can't have what? He said, you can't have a black man. I said, that's the point of the whole story. He says, you can't have a black man. I said, where in the code does it say I can't have a black man? Can't have a black man. He wouldn't let it go.
Feldstein returned to the EC offices and informed Gaines of Murphy's edict.
And Bill called up Judge Murphy and he said, what's going on? And Judge Murphy said, you can't have a black man. I said, and Bill said, I'm calling a press conference and I'm going to make a big stink about the bigotry of the code. And he said, all right, he can be a black man, but you got to take the perspiration off his skin. Bill said the four-letter word, you, and hung up on him and ran the story, and I think that was the end of our science fiction comic book.
Gaines had had enough. Judgment Day became the last story in the last comic book that EC ever published.
The whole thing kind of crashed and burned. It slowly wound down. Unfortunately for Bill, he had an ace in the hole with Mad magazine.
Although Mad had started slowly when it was launched in 1952, 3 years later, it was selling like hotcakes. In the summer of 1955, editor Harvey Kurtzman convinced Gaines to change the 10-cent comic book into a 25-cent black and white magazine. 1 year later, after a falling out over ownership of the magazine, Gaines fired Kurtzman and replaced him with Al Feldstein. Mad didn't miss a beat. Over the next 25 years, it became one of the most popular and successful magazines in America.
Death lives. Death lives in Tales from the Crypt.
Even though the EC Comics died a terrible death, they've come back alive decades later, bigger and better than ever. And I think it's almost a classic case of comeuppance. This time, the good guys got what they deserved.
EC's resurrection began in 1972, when a British company, Amicus Films, released a film version of Tales from the Crypt. Featuring Joan Collins and Peter Cushing, it adapted 5 comic book horror stories.
Tales from the Crypt, rated PG.
EC's horror comics served as inspiration for numerous filmmakers. Director George A. Romero grew up reading Tales from the Crypt.
I discovered EC Comics when I was a kid, and they weren't allowed in the house. I would smuggle them in and, you know, the classic thing, get under the covers with a flashlight and read them, and I just loved them.
Romero credits EC with indirectly influencing many of his films, including the cult classic, Night of the Living Dead.
I have at times, particularly in the first Night of the Living Dead, tried to do the real hard shadows and the weird angles and beautiful lighting that a comic book artist can create. I really tried to do that sort of framing. Undoubtedly was influenced by EC. Those books almost acted as a library, a reference library for anyone interested in working in horror.
In the early 1980s, Romero proposed a collaboration with famed horror writer Stephen King.
And I suggested, you know, why don't we do an anthology? And Steve said, well, if we're going to do an anthology, I think we should do sort of an homage to EC, because we both loved it, and wouldn't it be fun? A week later, he called up and said, I got the title. It's called Creepshow. We tried to give it a comic book look. And for the comic book itself that appears in the movie, and the panels that appear as drawings, Jack Kamen did those, who was an EC, one of the EC artists. The stories each started with the first page and a move-in on the illustration. We used these little yellow banners for narration. We actually panned sometimes over to the next panel, although they were moving. And then we used colored lights and gobos and graphics that, you know, that would come out of people's heads. And we just tried to have as much fun as we could and make it really look like a comic book.
John Carpenter is another Hollywood director whose career path was influenced by EC.
There's some really scary and really cool stuff in those comic books. And to be able to redo that visually and to keep the same spirit alive of those books in movies was great. I would say that the movie like The Fog is a direct connection to EC. It's the rotting corpses walking up. I mean, you can't get closer than that. One of the things that The Fog had in it was the vengeance of the dead. And I remember in EC Comics, that was always a big deal. There was somebody was murdered unfairly by someone else.
I'm the sixth conspirator. I'm Father Malone. Take me.
Often in the very end, the corpse would come back to get its revenge. Well, I thought that was really cool. That was hot. It just had a kind of great irony to it.
While EC found new life in the visions of directors they had inspired, the comic books themselves made their own resurgence in the late 1970s. Working from the original artwork which Bill Gaines had stored in a New York City vault, publisher Russ Cochran reprinted EC's comics in handsomely bound hardcover volumes. The complete EC library proved to be enormously popular among collectors and fans.
I get letters all the time of people saying, thank you for publishing these. I loved these when I was a kid. I never thought I'd see them again, and now I can get them again, and I'm really enjoying it.